Hi everyone, it's me. Welcome to today's video. We are going to be doing our mid-year freakout book tag today. It's that time of the year. It's in the middle of the year. It's time to reflect on what we've read so far in the first half. So let's just get straight into it. Just to give you my mid-year reading goal update, my reading goal was 100 books this year. So out of my 100 book reading goal, I have read 73. So according to Goodreads, I am 26 books ahead of schedule, which is absolutely wonderful. But to get into the tags, so I don't know who actually invented this book tag and who created these original prompts. I just know that like almost every single booktuber out there uses these same prompts for their mid-year book freakout tags. So I don't know, I'm just gonna credit everyone for this one. Everyone on YouTube who has posted this mid-year book tag, you get credit for all these prompts. So the first prompt is best book you've read so far. And because I personally cannot choose just one, for every prompt, I'm gonna be talking about 3 different books. So first best book that I have read so far has to be Sunrise on the Reaping by Suzanne Collins. I don't think this book needs any introduction. I know you've probably seen this all over, whether it's in bookstores, whether it's on your own shelves, whether it's in other videos or blogs or bestseller lists or movie casting updates. I have decided that this is the year of the prequels. We have had so many wonderful prequels being published this year, and this one was no exception. And I'm so glad that this Hunger Games prequel did not disappoint, because something like this, especially this story, you know, we all had such high expectations for it because of everything we already knew from the original trilogy, and the fact that Suzanne Collins was able to deliver not only like the most heart-wrenching, beautiful, but tragic story, she was also able to make it feel authentic to the original trilogy and also the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes prequel. Like everything connected so well in this book. Everything felt like so genuine and canon and just like felt like it belonged to the world, while also telling an entirely different story, gave us a lot more insight into this world. And this book truly was just like the perfect link between the original Hunger Games trilogy and Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. Like it just connected all of these dots that like us as readers were trying to connect. So yeah, definitely one of my top reads of the year. Thank goodness. So glad about that. My second top read of the year, and these are also in no particular order. I'm just kind of listing 3, but like these are in no way ranked because I don't think I would be able to choose between these 3, but My Friends by Fredrik Backman. This has been the year that I discovered Fredrik Backman, and I'm so happy about it. I started off reading Beartown, I think in February actually, and since February I have read 5 of his books this year. So far, out of the 5 books that I've read from him, I've loved every single one of them. Literally, all of them have been a full solid 5-star for me, but I have to say My Friends is my favorite. There was just something about this book that felt the most well-rounded, I think, and all of his books do feel well-rounded, but this one I think was just the most powerful for me personally. I think it had the perfect balance of happy, funny, silly moments along with the more serious, deeper issues and elements that were going on in the book. It just had the perfect balance between those two, and I talk about this a lot, but sometimes with books that are like more emotional or that are supposed to make you feel things, sometimes it just feels like a big just like trauma dump or just like a consistent sad feeling throughout the book where it starts to feel monotone because it's just all so sad. I feel like Fredrik Backman really did a good job with this one, where you felt like all of the highs and the lows, and it felt more realistic that way, and it made me cry, okay? Within the first 50 pages as I was reading this, I cried twice already, but along with those like, I don't know, sad emotions, I also laughed. One sentence I'd be laughing, the next sentence I'd be tearing up. Like it was just a genuine roller coaster, and the characters in this book, along with all of his other books, are so unique. They feel so fully fleshed out. They feel like real people that Fredrik Backman has, you know, studied over and over and over again and put together so meticulously. It feels like he knows all of his characters so deep down in their souls, and just his writing style is so wonderful. Like his books, I feel like in a way are a little bit predictable, but also are completely not, because he will be leading you in one direction and just completely flip it on you at the last second. There are just so many little mini surprises and things throughout his books. They're just so good. And I think honestly this year he's taught me a lot about like what it is to be a human, and that maybe sounds a little bit cheesy, but it's true. Like he's shown me so many different types of humans that come from different experiences. I also didn't even tell you what this book is about. I guess kind of purposefully, because I went into this book quite blind, but just to give you a little quick setup for this book, we start out with Louisa in this one. She has just turned 18. She's lived a life in foster care, so she's moved from house to house. You know, she hasn't had the coziest, fuzziest upbringing, but there has always been this painting that she has loved. And at the beginning of the book, she basically sneaks into this art gallery to have a chance to look at this painting in person for the first time, because she's always just had this like little postcard of it. Her timeline goes on from there, but we also have a dual timeline set up in this book where we jump back to the childhood of the painter of this painting, and we get the backstory of like how this painting was made, why this painting was made, who are these people in the painting, what are their stories, and all of that. That's my friends, just in case you didn't know. And my third top read of this year, again in no particular order, has to be Atmosphere by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I actually just recently read this in my 24-hour readathon video, but this book made me absolutely sob. I think out of all the books so far this year, I have cried the hardest to this one. We are mostly set in the 80s. We do have a dual timeline situation here as well, where we have like a past 1980s timeline and we have the more present day timeline. But in the past timeline, Joan is a lover of astronomy. She's currently teaching. She's a professor at like a university for, I think, like astronomy and physics, but she's always itched for more. And one day NASA announces that they're recruiting for their new space shuttle program, and for the first time ever, they are accepting women. So Joan jumps at this opportunity, gets into this space shuttle program, and learns all about life, love, space, everything. Like there's just so much packed into the 330 pages that is this book. I would classify this one as like a literary fiction with undertones of romance, I guess. It's not a romance book, I don't think, but it does have quite a wonderful romance subplot in there. I read this in one sitting. It utterly consumed me. Because of the dual timeline, we had this consistent switching of moods, because in our present day timeline, we are on like an active space mission, and I feel like that timeline was just so fast-paced, anxiety-inducing, stress-inducing. And then we would jump back to the past, where we get more of like the character development and kind of slower moving timeline. So I feel like the jumps between those timelines were done so well, kept the book like immersive and interesting, and I think everyone needs to read this book. Next tag is best sequel you've read so far. Okay, so the first one is actually, this is kind of a cheat, and it's also a prequel, but you know, I'm gonna consider it a sequel. But I did get the arc for Wild Reverence. This is the prequel that is set in the same world as Divine Rivals by Rebecca Ross, and I absolutely loved this so much. It is actually one of those instances where I feel like this is the best book that belongs in this world so far, so I actually enjoyed this book even better than the original duology. I don't really want to tell you that much about the plot of it, but if you've read Divine Rivals, you know we're set in a world that is kind of like not ruled by gods, but there's a lot of influence from the gods into the mortal world. Like there's just like a little bit of magic that kind of like pokes into the mortal world once in a while. But in Wild Reverence, we focus a lot more on the gods. We actually tell the story of the gods, and so we have a lot more magic involved. We get backstory about some of the gods that, you know, appear in the Divine Rivals duology, as well as a lot of other characters in there. I just found it was a really beautiful story. Like we had a kind of coming of age element, we had a good romance subplot as well, obviously. And it just felt very like mythological. It felt very like expansive. We built a lot more on the world, which is something I think a lot of people were missing in the original Divine Rivals duology. I wouldn't say this is like an exact prequel to Divine Rivals. Like it doesn't just like directly lead into it, but you just get more of the lore on the world, and I absolutely loved this story. It's one of those like slow moving stories, but in like a wonderful way, where you get all these like deep, rich characters and you feel like you have lived all of these lives. Rebecca Ross's writing is just stunning, beautiful as always, and I just genuinely, I really loved this story so much. A very atmospheric read along with a very compelling story. Another sequel that I loved this year was actually, where is it? Wisteria by Adalyn Grace. So this one is the third book in the Belladonna trilogy. It is a YA romantasy series, and in the first two books we follow like one main character and kind of her story, but in this one, Wisteria, we actually switch our focus to another character. We move to her cousin's point of view. And to be honest, this was my favorite book in the trilogy. Like, I loved this point of view. I did really like the first two books as well, but this one really stood out to me. It's kind of hard for me to say anything about the plot in this one because I feel like it would kind of spoil the things that happened in the first two books. So I can't say much, but what I can say is that this book gave me Once Upon a Broken Heart vibes. It gave me Evangeline and Jax vibes, and I love, love, love Evangeline and Jax. So I loved this book. I think it was the perfect conclusion to this world. I know Adalyn Grace is also publishing a holiday novella near the end of this year, and I'm really excited to read that because I just think this world is so lovely. It is a romantasy, so the fantasy and the world are not like that complex. They feel more like fairy tale vibes. I would say the first two books feel like a gothic fairy tale, and this third one feels more like whimsical fairy tale. This one was just wonderful. I loved the banter in this one. I loved the development of the romance in this one. And if you're missing some Evangeline and Jax, you will have to read the first two books to get to this one, but the first two books are also good. This was my favorite book in the series by far. And we're gonna talk about another Fredrik Backman for the third sequel that I absolutely love. And again, these are all in no particular order, but Us Against You by Fredrik Backman. This is the second book in the Beartown trilogy. I actually think this was my favorite in the trilogy. And if you don't know what the Beartown trilogy is, it's hard to describe. It's a book about hockey, but it's not a book about hockey. Like, it's about so much more. We basically follow this really small, remote town where hockey is kind of like the main source of income for the entire town. Like, hockey is the entire economy. So there's just a lot of stakes on the hockey team. Like, the entire town is depending on the hockey team. They're all invested on their success. And we follow like this huge bird's eye point of view almost of the town and how this tragic incident that happened kind of within the hockey team in the town affects everyone, because we follow characters on the team, we follow some of their parents, we follow some of the other people just in the town, we follow people in the neighboring town, and we just see how this one really tragic incident can like web out and affect so many people in such drastic ways, and how everything is so connected. I would say Us Against You is actually my favorite in the series, because although I loved every single book in the series, they were all a 5-star for me. Beartown, I found, took a little while to get into. As someone who, you know, I'm not really like a hockey lover. I know I'm Canadian, but I don't really love sports in general. And so reading about sports sometimes is hard for me. It did take me a little while to get into Beartown, but once I realized that the book wasn't actually about hockey, but was more about like the way this team is brought together and the way that it like spreads out and affects the entire town, like that's when I started like understanding what it was all about. And so while I loved Beartown, the first half of it, I would say, was like a little bit draggy for me. This one I think was just perfect because I already had established like what this book was about. I already knew like many of the characters, and I feel like we just got like straight into it a lot quicker. And the story honestly was also just like heartbreaking. I know I was just talking about My Friends by Fredrik Backman and how it balances humor and lightness with these darker themes really well. I would say the Beartown trilogy in general is a lot darker, has a lot more just like serious dark undertones, not even undertones, overtones. Like the entire book feels very dark, sad, and heavy. That's just, you know, a bit of a difference in the vibe between this trilogy and something like My Friends or even A Man Called Ove that feel a lot more quirky. I would say these books don't really feel quirky. They're just a lot more serious, character-driven, sad, traumatic stories, but are written so well, like they do. The thing is, Fredrik Backman does give you hope at the end of his books. They're not just like sad, 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 and you end up sad. Like you end up sad, but with like, you know, a little bit of hope at the end of the road that he like inserts in there for you. That's Us Against You. Next tag is new release you haven't read yet but you want to. So the first one, I'm not gonna get this out of my TBR cart because it's on the bottom there and it's a hardcover and I know it's gonna be hard to get out and then like back onto the cart again, but A Sea of Unspoken Things by Adrian Young. This is one of my most anticipated releases of this year, and I actually did buy a copy of it like right when it came out, but for some reason I have not read it yet, and I feel like now that it's summer, I don't know if it's the time to read it because I know Adrian Young's books are generally very atmospheric and maybe read better in like the fall and winter months. So I'm unsure. I may have to pause on that one until the fall when we get back into cooler weather, but we'll see. Maybe I'll pick it up sometime this summer if I'm in the mood, but I definitely still want to read that. There's also Voice of the Ocean by Kelsey and Peacha K. I don't have a copy of this book yet, but it has been released. It is a pirate romantasy, like a pirate mermaid romantasy, which sounds just so fun. And honestly, I don't think that's something I've really read before. And it sounds like a really good like summer themed romantasy as well because it's like pirates. That's definitely a book I'm excited for. And then also One Golden Summer by Carly Fortune. I feel like Carly Fortune's books have been a hit or a miss for me. Like I've really liked some of them and really disliked some of them, but this one is her new release this year. I'm sure you've all heard of it, but we actually follow a character that appears in Every Summer After. I think that's what her first book was called. For some reason, her book titles are hard for me to remember, but it does follow like the brother character that appears in that book. And I've heard wonderful things about this one. I've actually heard really, really good things. Some say this is her best book so far, and I just really do like her books for that Canadian summer vibe. They feel very nostalgic to me. They feel very real. As someone who experiences Canadian summers myself, I can definitely confirm that her books feel very genuine in terms of those vibes, and I think that's where her strengths lie. My criticism on some of her past books have just been like the plots haven't been very strong. I think with her release last year especially, I can't remember what it's called, you guys. It's the one that was set in PEI. I feel like the vibes were so good and the tension was so good between our two characters, but the plot just was not plotting for me. Like there was not much that happened, and so if you're a For the Vibes reader, I think her books would be wonderful, but I am hoping that this new release has more of a plot and has something that will keep my interest longer because yeah, she's just really good at setting those vibes and the tension and just like summer feels. Our next tag is Most Anticipated Release for the Second Half of the Year. Number 1, Catabasis by R.F. Kuang. I don't think I need to elaborate on this one. I am R.F. Kuang's #1 fan. I'm sure many other readers would say the same thing, but I insist I am the #1 fan. I have been looking forward to this book, I don't know, for the past 2 years or like year and a half, like literally since it was announced, I have been looking forward to it. This is a fantasy and it follows 2 students as they descend into hell to rescue one of their professors. So we have like a dark academia vibe. We have 2 characters. We have what R.F. Kuang describes as a love story, but not a romance. And that equally excites me as well as terrifies me. What I do know is R.F. Kuang rips my heart out every single time in the best way. And I'm absolutely so excited for this one. Another book I'm excited for is The Strength of the Few by James Islington. I've been saying James Islington for forever, and one of you actually corrected me saying that it's actually pronounced Islington, so thank you. If that was you, thank you so much. This is the second book to The Will of the Many, which is I think the series is called the Hierarchy series. If you love fantasy and you have not read The Will of the Many, you need to read it because it was, I don't know, it was just so good. There were parts of it that felt nostalgic because we follow an orphan, Vis, who gets adopted by this like mysterious man who's like really high up in the hierarchy and is presented with an option. He can be adopted by this guy and live a nice, comfortable life as long as he goes to this really prestigious school. And not only does he have to be the top of his class, but he also has to spy on certain people to report back to his adoptee? No, the person who's adopting him. And so we get into this like academic setting, which feels really fun and nostalgic, but then we also have all of these politics and a lot of stuff going on in the world that feels really deep and complex. And the twist at the end of this book, you guys, was insane. It was something I did not see coming at all, and I just, I was left so on the edge of my seat that I need the next book immediately. So I'm really excited for The Strength of the Few for sure. And a third book that I'm really excited for, there are definitely more than 3, but I'm keeping it to 3 for each tag in this video, is actually Alchemy of Secrets by Stephanie Garber. I actually don't know that much about this plot, but what I do know is this is an adult novel. And as someone who loved both Caraval and Once Upon a Broken Heart from Stephanie Garber, I'm excited to see what her adult writing is like, because I do know those other two trilogies by her do feel very YA. Like, they're very young reading, and while I loved them, like, they just felt so whimsy and fun to me. I'm really excited to see like what her adult writing is like what the vibe is going to be, how it's different, how it compares to her other two trilogies, and I'm really curious. I'm really excited to see what Stephanie Garber has in store for us. Moving on to biggest disappointment. So these three books are not like the worst books I've read this year, okay? I just want to clear that up first. These are not the worst books that I've read this year. I definitely I don't hate them per se, but these are just books that I had 5-star aspirations for. Like, I had really high hopes for, and maybe they just ended up being 3 stars. I think one of these is actually a 3.75, which is still good, but I thought it was going to be like a 5 or 6-star read. So there's just a little, you know, preface, a little disclaimer. I don't necessarily hate these books, but they were just disappointing. And the first one is The Irresistible Urge to Fall for Your Enemy by Bridget Knightley. I had such high hopes for this one because if you don't know the lore behind this book, this is a romantasy, but it is a traditionally published version of like a fan fiction story, more specifically a Hermione fan fiction. The original is called Draco Malfoy and the Mortifying Ordeal of Falling in Love. And although I never read the fan fiction, I just know that so many people love this fan fiction so much. It's highly regarded as like one of the best Hermione fan fictions out there, and I know a lot of my friends have read it as well. So when this book was coming out, I had really high hopes for it. And I didn't hate it, but I definitely had a lot of issues with it, and it was definitely disappointing compared to my expectations. I feel like it started out really fun. The humor was really present in it, but I think it honestly, it took too much of the book. I feel like there's just too much of this kind of crass, vulgar humor thrown into there, and while I enjoyed some of it, I think by the end it was just too much. I got really sick of it. I also feel like not enough happened in this book. It's actually really interesting because I know that this is based on a fan fiction, but the traditionally published version is actually spread out into a trilogy. And I didn't know this going into the book, but I thought it would just be a published entire, rewriting of the fan fiction. But no, they decided to split it into, I think, 3 books. I think this is going to be a trilogy, but because they split it, I think the story just felt like it moved so slowly. Everything needed to move faster. I was really disappointed that we didn't have really any conclusion at the end of the book. I think with series, I get very picky with the amount that is concluded by the end of the book versus how much is left for the next book. I understand with series you have to leave some things open so readers are, tempted to read on in the series, but I feel like this book just did not conclude anything, and it just left me so highly unsatisfied. It was a big disappointment. I feel like it had potential, but it just didn't pull through in the end for me. The second book that disappointed me, I actually do have in physical. It is unfortunately Rule of Wolves by Leigh Bardugo. This is the second book in the King of Scars duology. This is the latest installment in her Grishaverse, and I love the Grishaverse so much, which is why I had 6-star hopes for this book. Unfortunately, it was only a 3.75, which is still good, but kind of in a similar vein to The Irresistible Urge to Fall for Your Enemy. I feel like this book just didn't conclude enough for, a duology in itself. I enjoyed most of the journey as we were going through the book, but at the end, a lot was left unanswered. And at this point, this is considered a complete duology. I'm suspecting Leigh Bardugo is writing more Grishaverse books to come, and that's why she left so much open-ended. But when you're writing a separate series, you need to conclude your main plot points at the end of your series, and the things were not concluded at the end of this book, and it made me so frustrated and angry that I just feel so jaded when I think about this book because it could have been so good. It had so much potential. I think the character building in this duology especially is really strong, but yeah, I just need a conclusion. I need my plot points to be wrapped up, and they were not wrapped up in here. So that's why Rule of Wolves was disappointing to me. But again, as I mentioned, it wasn't a bad book, it just disappointed me. And the third one, I was so disappointed by Firefly Lane by Kristen Hanna. This wasn't a 1-star book. I think I ended up giving I don't know, a 2.5 to a 3. I can't remember my exact rating, but I love Kristen Hanna. Okay, she's one of my favorite authors. I've read 5 books from her, and I've loved them all except for this one. In this book, we basically follow two friends as they go through 3 decades of their lives, and it's supposed to like really highlight this female friendship and the strength of this female bond. And the thing is, I did not like this friendship whatsoever. I had hopes for this book at first. I will say probably like the first 100 pages of this book was a 5-star read to me. Like I genuinely did love the setup and like the introduction of our characters and seeing how they met and started bonding. But as the book went on, the friendship turned so toxic, like too toxic for me, like to the point where like there was no redemption for me. And it was one character in this book in particular. I do think both of the characters in this friendship just like were kind of a little bit toxic to each other. Like they just were not meant to be friends. But there's definitely one character in my opinion that was more toxic than the other, and she just like irked me throughout this entire book. I wanted the one friend to just like drop this friend and be like, okay, if you're gonna be like this and like drag my life down this badly, like you don't deserve to be my friend. And I wanted them to cut ties, and I was not rooting for this friendship. And as a book that is supposed to be highlighting this friendship, that is the exact opposite of what you want. And so I couldn't get on board with how these characters were treating each other. I just could not love this book. And I know there is like a sequel, like a follow-up to this book, where a lot of you guys have said that the character I thought was toxic has more of like an arc and more of a redemption in the second book. But I just think I was so not sold on the arc and the characters in this one book, which is, you know, it's not short. Almost 500 pages in this book. I would think that more of an arc should have happened within 500 pages. I just don't feel the urge at all to pick up the second book. So that was a really big disappointment for me because I've loved literally every other Kristen Hanna book that I've read. Okay, biggest surprise. First one has to be Shark Heart by Emily Haybeck. This book was so out of my comfort zone, but also I feel like in my comfort zone now because I've been branching out a lot in the past month or so, and this is a literary fiction, a very character-driven story where we follow a newlywed couple, and at the beginning of the book, the husband starts turning into a shark. We're in this kind of like weird real-life world, but with a little bit of magical realism, and in this world, it's kind of become a normal occurrence for humans to start turning into animals. Some humans will start turning into like a bird, some will start turning into like a cat, I don't know. But the husband in this one starts turning into a shark, and that is one of the more difficult mutations to go through in this world. But I found this book was like really beautifully written. It really sold me on this concept. It doesn't really focus on like the magic of it. Like it's not a fantasy whatsoever. It's not like, oh, you're a shark and you have shark powers now. It focuses more on like the psychology of like what you go through when something like this happens and like challenges your marriage, for example. So like as the husband starts turning into a shark, you know, he starts forgetting things, he starts losing his mind, he starts having like the feral side of his brain take over at points. And then we also follow his wife, who's like trying to deal with this, who still loves him, who wants to hold on to him and all the memories of him, but then also sees his transformation, like not only physically but mentally. And it was just such a beautiful read. It is quite sad. It does have a very melancholy tone throughout, but I found it was beautifully written. It also has a really interesting structure in the way it's formatted. Like you will have pages that are formatted kind of like screenplays, sort of like this page. I don't want to show you just in case anything spoils. We have certain chapters that are like 1 sentence long or only 1 paragraph long, like really, really short pages like this. And I feel like the formatting of it kind of kept you immersed and engaged in it as well, like the constant switching of the formatting, and also kind of like felt like you were reading a book of poetry, but like not poetry. Like it's definitely a narrative story, but kind of felt like a collection of just like thoughts, but they all made sense in a coherent timeline. And I really thought this was beautiful. And yeah, it was definitely a big surprise because I literally did not know what to expect with this one, and I didn't know if I would like it or not, but I ended up really loving it. So definitely surprised with that one. I was also surprised but not surprised by The Favorites by Lane Fargo. I kind of like knew I would love this book because I used to figure skate when I was a kid, and I love anything to do with figure skating. So this follows a figure skating couple as they train for the Olympics, and like we follow all the drama that happens along the way. I described this book as like a mixture of Taylor Jenkins Reid books, like a mixture of Daisy Jones because we have some interview formatting, some Carrie Soto because we have this plot where we're training in such an intense environment, and then combine that with like Magnolia Parks because we have so many like toxic characters doing toxic things to each other. And this book just surprised me on how like riveting it was and how I was just so addicted to it the entire way through. Because if you were to like break this book out and just give me the tropes of it, I would tell you I would hate this book. Like there are so many tropes that I hate in this book, but because of the way it was written, and I think because of the point of this book, I ended up really loving it. It's definitely surprised me. And then speaking of Magnolia Parks, another book that definitely surprised me was Daisy Hates the Great Undoing by Jessa Hastings. If you guys have been following me, you know that when I started the first Magnolia book, I was really like, I didn't really like it, but I did commit to continuing the series because I had heard it just gets a lot better as you go on. And I will say that this book happily surprised me. This is the 4th book in the series, and the series overall has been growing on me as I've been reading the series, but this one really convinced me on Magnolia herself as a character, which I never expected that I would like Magnolia as a character. I was just kind of continuing to read the book for the plot, and I definitely love like the Daisy Hates characters much more than the Magnolia side of the series. But this book made me appreciate Magnolia in a way that I have never appreciated before. But like just seeing her from not her own perspective and not from her like toxic love interests perspective was really refreshing, because we see Daisy, for example, get to know Magnolia more throughout this book, and we see Magnolia growing on her as like a friend, and as a reader you kind of go through the journey along with Daisy. And I will say Magnolia has grown on me in this book. Like I see her, like I feel like she's such a girl's girl. I feel like she's such a good character now after reading this book, which wasn't even about Magnolia to begin with, which is so interesting. But yeah, I would say this book surprised me because it really changed my perspective on certain characters in this book and really made me think about like point of views and how you're reading certain characters because you're in a certain person's mind, but when you see that character from another perspective, you may think of them completely different. This book did that to me, and so for that, I was really surprised. Okay, favorite new author. I've talked about him so much, but Fredrik Backman. I don't think I need to talk about him more because I've already talked about 2 of his books already, but as I mentioned, I read Beartown in February, and since then I've read 5 of his books already this year. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. Definitely a new favorite author of mine. Another author that I didn't discover this year, but I kind of like fell more in love with is ML Wang. I think I read The Sword of Kaigen by her last year, like at the end of last year, and I absolutely loved that book. But when I read Blood Over Brighthaven this year, it really like solidified her as one of my new favorite authors, because this book on one hand is so different to The Sword of Kaigen, but also hits so hard just in a different way. And I think after reading this one, I realized how versatile she is as an author and how good she is at telling all these different stories. And I think with this book, like it was so short. I mean, it's not that short. It's like around 400 pages, but for a fantasy book, like a standalone fantasy, I feel like that's really short. And the world, the complexity of the world and the story and the characters she had in this book were so ambitious that managing to tell this entire story within only 400 pages was really impressive to me. And I think when an author can do that, I'm immediately sold. So ML Wang, definitely one of my new favorites from this year. And then on a completely other note, I would have to say Cara Bastone. Ready or Not was the first book I read from her kind of a few months ago, I think. And I feel like it's hard for me to find new favorite romance authors because I do get quite picky with my contemporary romance. There has to be a good balance of plot that comes along with the romance for me, and I also just have a hard time with like romance dialogue and also like spice scenes for me. I think they have to be written in a very specific way for me to enjoy them. And so when I read Ready or Not, I was happily surprised. I feel like Cara Bastione, her writing just flows very well. Like when I read her writing, I don't even have to think about it. Like she writes in a way that just like agrees so well with my brain. She also writes like the most wholesome, wonderful, lovable love interests and romances. And I just love the way she portrays like these healthy adult relationships, which I find is kind of rare to find these days. She's also really good at establishing friendships and emotional connection before the physical stuff happens, which I also appreciate. And yeah, I've read this one and I've read Promise Me Sunshine, and I think she's one of my new top romance authors. Okay, newest fictional crush. I mean, I was just holding the book. Shep in Ready or Not. Again, just like the most wholesome golden retriever love interest. If you are tired and bored and sick of reading like Enemies to Lovers or Rivals to Lovers or Grumpy Sunshine, try this one out. I feel like it was so refreshing to me. Something that felt different in this sea of like morally gray love interest. Picking this one up again because Julian hates. Do I need to explain more? I feel like a lot of people have read this series and a lot of people do love Julian Hates, but there's just something about him, like definitely the complete opposite of Shep from Ready or Not, but someone who's like tough and hard on the exterior, but like secretly pays attention and cares so deeply. Yeah. Julian Hates. And we're starting to repeat books because I clearly have like my set of like top reads of the year, but Eris from this book. And I'm not gonna say any more because again, I can't really say things without spoiling stuff that happens earlier in the series, but true Jax vibes with this one. Newest favorite character, I have to say, here's another repeat, Benji from Beartown. I think just like the arc his character went on from Beartown to The Winners, the third book in the series, was incredible. And Fredrik Backman just had to like really break me with Benji's character. Definitely one of my favorite fictional characters of all time, like just so interesting. He's one of those characters that you're just rooting for the entire time. Like you can't help but love them and root for them, and the things that he went through and the development he had and the arc he had was just wonderful. You have to read this trilogy, if only to just experience Benji. And I know I just mentioned I did not love Rule of Wolves, which was the conclusion to this duology, but Nikolai from the Grishaverse in general is one of my favorite fictional characters of all time. He's one of those characters that should, like he's kind of royal, but he's one of those characters that should be like stuck up and snotty, and in a way he kind of is, but in like a very funny, like teasing, joking, bantery way. He's just such a fun character to read about. I love Nikolai so much in this world. Okay, third character that I love, where is it? He's down here. The gargoyle from The Night and the Moth. This book I feel like was just so like serious and atmospheric and misty and dark and gothic that having this gargoyle character that acted as your comedic relief but also had this like heartbreaking story when you like get deeper into this character. This gargoyle was written so well, okay? And I don't want to say any more because I fear I will spoil something, but please read this book and pay attention to the gargoyle. Such a wonderful character. Book that made me cry. I actually picked more than 3 for this one, and we're just gonna list them out real quick because I have talked about some of these already, but the books that made me fully cry, like tears, cry, not just like sad, because a lot of books do make me sad. Sunrise and the Reaping, A Man Called Ove, Us Against You, My Friends, The Winners, and Atmosphere. And that is 4 of the 5 Fredrik Backman books that I read this year. Beartown actually did not make me cry. It made me feel sad, but I didn't cry until later in the series. I think when I felt more attached to certain characters. But yeah, those are the books that made me cry. And then books that made me happy. I'm not gonna grab it again, but Ready or Not that I just talked about. Again, it just was such a wholesome romance. It just made me smile. It was a nice change in pace to all the sad books that I read, and it just felt so wonderful and cozy. Also, where is it? I think it's behind you. House in the Cerulean Sea. I've talked about this book a lot in this channel recently as well, so not gonna elaborate too much, but this book just felt like literally the warmest, fuzziest, coziest hug, and I loved it so much. And I'm gonna have to say My Friends, which may be surprising because as you just saw, this was on my books that made me cry list, but I'm telling you, at the same time, like this book made me laugh, it made me smile, the ending made me happy in this sad way. But overall, I feel like this book was so positive. Like, it felt so positive and happy, even though there were so many sad things going on. You just have to experience it for yourself. Second last tag is most beautiful book you've gotten this year. Ooh, I think I'm gonna have to say Shark Heart is one of them. Like, just look at this cover. I think the art is absolutely stunning. I love the design of it. There's just something about, like, I don't know if this is hand drawn or like digitally drawn, but whatever it is absolutely lovely. And I definitely picked this book up because of the cover. And it was a lovely surprise that I really enjoyed what was inside as well. Also, I actually didn't really love this book. It is a sapphic romance, like a sapphic period romance, but unfortunately the execution of it kind of fell short for me, but the cover of it is absolutely stunning. This is Time and Tide by J.M. Frey. It wasn't a complete hit for me, but I think the premise of it was really interesting, and yeah, the cover is just gorgeous. And I also really love the cover for Water Moon by Samantha Soto Yambao. I just think this cover art is wonderful. It matches the vibe of the book absolutely perfectly as well. This is the back of it also, and I do have the book of the month copy, but with the like non-book of the month copy, you can actually, like, there's instructions inside the dust cover to like fold the dust jacket into origami, and I think that's just so cute. And I think the inner cover of the book is also beautiful, because after you've used the dust jacket to make origami, obviously you can't put it back on the book, so the inside is beautiful as well. But yeah, this one is stunning. And our last tag, what books do you need to read by the end of this year? I mean, so many. You guys know I'm on a TBR takedown project, so I have a lot of books I want to read, but just to pick 3 somehow, I definitely want to finish the Ember in the Ashes quartet. So I've read the first book so far. I do need to get the rest of the books so I can read the rest of the series. I think it's going to be a really wonderfully addictive series for me. I also do have Red Rising. That is a series that I really want to get into. The first book has been sitting on my TBR cart for a few months now. And also I want to get into the Stormlight Archives, which is something that is a little bit intimidating to me, but is definitely something I want to tackle this year. And I do have The Way of Kings sitting on my TBR cart as well. So those are 3 books I definitely need to get to at some point this year. There we have it. That is my mid-year book freakout tag. We've talked for a while in this one, so I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave me a like and a comment. If you don't know what to comment down below, maybe like go through these prompts and let me know in the comments what books you would choose for your mid-year book freakout tag. Oh, also let me know how many books you've read so far this year. If you like me, subscribe, do that bell thing, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!